I'm very happy to introduce a friend of mine who is going to join us for Show Corners once in a while, and we appreciate her a lot for this. She's a special person. Tammy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Gadi?
I'm good. I'm worried you would be upset that I called you special, but that's how I think of you.
Well, I will take it in the spirit in which it was given.
Perfect. So I want to say and share with people a little bit about you. You are, I think, first and foremost, a science fiction fantasy fan.
Yes.
You also love Hamilton, which is how we connected, I think.
Yes.
Thinking into the night in Dublin and the stuff weekend for Worldcon. You're a con runner. You're a pro cocktail enthusiast. You are chief tasting officer for your company. Tammy's Tastings recently took online.
Yes.
You're co-authors of Cheers to Michigan. You based your segments, I think, on with Lester Graham, Michigan Radio's Starside program. And people should also know your website, tammystastings.com, and you're also on Facebook.
Yes.
I'm just excited about everything you do, honestly.
Yeah, I'm excited too. It's been a really interesting transition. I've been teaching public cocktail classes since 2011. And, that's a bunch of people in a closed space passing things around from hand to hand. And that clearly was not going to work under our current circumstances. But I made the switch to online, and it's been a lot of fun and really let me use different tools that I can use standing at a bar. So I've really enjoyed making the transition, and I think the people who've been taking the classes are having a great time too.
Perfect. So take it away.
All right. So as Malka said, when we were talking in advance of the show, I said, what kind of cocktails do you like? I was trying to figure out what to make today. And she pointed me to this Criminal Element website where they have a pick your poison spot where they will come up with a drink for a book that they like that week. And Infomocracy was one of the ones that they featured. And of course, the drink they made with it was the Ginfomocracy, which is great. I love punny names and I love gin. So this is a perfect drink for me. So this is also a perfect drink for the time of year we're in. I'm here in Michigan right now, and today was our first really beautiful day. I think it cracked 70 Fahrenheit. And so it's been a great, beautiful day. So this is a nice summery cocktail to celebrate that. So I'm going to start off with 3 slices of cucumber. The recipe on the website doesn't include this, but the recipe we'll put in the show notes will. I like to add a pinch of salt anytime I'm making a drink that has cucumber in it. It just helps bring out the cucumbery flavor. Now I need to muddle this up. This is going to get a little noisy, but I really want to bring out the cucumber juice that's in these. So stay with me. If you don't have a muddler at home, sometimes people will tell you to use the end of a wooden spoon, but it's really kind of narrow to accomplish what we're going for here. The best thing to do if you don't have a muddler is just to grate your cucumber on the side of a cheese grater, and then throw that in before you shake your cocktail. Back to muddling. All right, I think I've got that nice and pulped up in there now. So this is a gin cocktail. I'm going to use Beefeater gin today because I have it around and I really like it. This drink, because of the cucumber, because it's also going to have a floral element with the Saint Germain, this would be a great drink to bust out your Hendrix for if you have some. But really, you can use any gin that you like that you think will go with these flavors. So 2 ounces of gin. And then I mentioned this sweet, tropical, fruity, floral Saint Germain. So that is really popular. It was launched in 2007, which you would not guess from this beautiful Art Deco bottle. You would think this spirit had been around forever. This liqueur had been around forever. But it's fairly new and insanely delicious. In the industry, it's known as bartender's ketchup because it tastes great and goes with everything, as you can tell by my nearly empty bottle. So 3/4 of an ounce of the Saint Germain goes into the shaker. Then some lemon juice. So the most important thing you can do if you're making a cocktail at home is to use freshly squeezed juice. But I do understand things are challenging right now. If all you have is squeezy bottle juice that's been in your fridge, one of those little fake lemons. Go ahead and use that. It's still going to be delicious. I'm going to use 1/2 ounce. The original recipe called for 1/4 ounce, but I know that I tend to like my drinks a little bit more tart. And the great thing about making a cocktail at home is that you can adjust it to your own liking. So 1/2 ounce of fresh lemon juice goes right in there. And that is everything I need for now, except of course some ice. I'm gonna add a generous amount of ice here. A lot of people, when they're mixing drinks at home, will use too little ice in the shaker. So got a nice amount of ice. I'm gonna take the top of my shaker and combine it. This is gonna get noisy again, so stay with me. I want to shake that till it gets really nice and cold on the outside. Now I'm going to strain it off into my glass. You could serve this in a martini glass, but I want to sit on the porch with this, and martini glasses are messy. So I'm going to strain it into a rocks glass. And also I'm feeling a little extra today. So I could strain this just as is with my Hawthorne strainer here on top, but it's going to have some cucumber pulp floating around, and I want something a little more refined as I sit on the porch. So I'm going to strain it through a tea strainer. Trying to get all that pulp out. All right, get these things out of the way. One last thing, again, to kind of really play up the spring summer element of this drink is just 1 ounce or so of club soda. So you'll notice I'm adding that to the glass without any ice. A lot of times drinks that call for being topped with club soda, you'll add them at the very end once the drink is already sitting on the ice. The club soda has a tendency to just kind of hang out on the top if you do that. So I've mixed it in to the glass since I poured it right away. And now when I add my ice on top, the drink will be all combined together. I'm gonna finish that off by floating a cucumber right on the top. Cheers, the Ginfomocracy. I like it. Thanks for the inspiration, Malka.
Thank you very much, Tammy. That was the most efficient thing I've ever seen done, drinking or otherwise.
Well, you know, you don't want to take too much. You don't want to take more time than you need. You want to take the right amount of time when you're making a cocktail. But the goal is to get it good, cold, fast, and to the person who's going to drink it. And that person is me. I wish I could offer you one, Gadi.
Oh, you will. Trust me on that. I love that you do this. I just wonder how you got into it.
So I'm a person who's always loved feeding people. I've always loved food and drink. I had started Tammy's Tastings in 2006. I was doing artisan chocolates and tasting events, and nobody knew they needed a tasting event, but chocolates I was making and shipping around the country, and that was really a lot of fun. And then as my interest changed, my business changed as well, and in 2011, 2010, 2009, that period, I started getting really interested in craft cocktails. So cocktails were a big thing in the pre-Prohibition period. And then they kind of declined through the 20th century up until the beginning of the 2000s when we have this craft cocktail revival. And all of a sudden we're interested in good quality cocktails again. So I was really caught up in that, started learning about making drinks, started hosting cocktail parties at home. And I thought, well, you know, I'd really like learning to do these things. I bet other people would want to learn to do them too. So I did a little test class and some people were interested, and then I talked to a local bar and they said, well, you should do that here when we're closed. And from there it just snowballed. I really hit the market at just the right time, starting in 2011 when here in Michigan, the first craft cocktail bars, the first local distilleries were opening up. And it's grown leaps and bounds since then. And one of the most fun things for me now with going online is that I'm teaching classes to people all over the world. So this afternoon we had folks from all over Michigan and from Dublin, Ireland, and from Amsterdam. So it's been really fun.
Tammy, this class was completely delightful. Thank you for showing us this. I've taken a hobby of trying to make food from different fictional worlds. And so I sort of understand the urge to bring stories to life this way. How did you think about this drink emerging from Malka's world?
Well, we all take our inspirations where we can get them, and I love that the Criminal Element website is doing that, taking drinks, taking books and making drinks out of them. So I'm always looking for those opportunities as well. And I know if anybody's watching and you have ideas, if you have questions about things that we could make future drinks on Show Corners, that would be awesome.
I was gonna say, do you have an alcoholic butterbeer or some of the famous?
So I mostly don't try to recreate those drinks. A lot of them aren't necessarily very good. I am a geek who loves cocktails, so I'm both a science fiction and fantasy fan, so I'm a geek in that way, and I'm a cocktail geek, but I don't always mix those streams very well. So, you know, I don't make Romulan ale. I just make really good drinks to drink while you're hanging out at a con or reading your favorite book or watching your favorite TV show.
It's the pairing.
Yeah, I'm the Hugo administrator for this year's Worldcon. So there is a drink called the Hugo, and as soon as we get the Hugo packet ready to go out to the Hugo voters, that's the package of material they get to review and read to prepare for voting. As soon as that's ready, I would love to do a show corner where we make the Hugo cocktail, which is completely delicious and can commemorate that important time that's coming hopefully very soon.
You know, I think this might be more relevant than ever this year when people would be very well able to, you know, all make their own drink at home. People don't always attend these events from home. So
Right.
I know what I'll be drinking then. I don't know what's going to be in it yet because you haven't told us, but I know what I'll be drinking during the Hugos.
It will be very suitable. It's a nice fizzy sparkling wine cocktail, so it's extra suitable.
Oh, nice.
I have a question for you. Moving online in this way, that's something a lot of people are doing with right now, and it's not been easy, I'm sure, but you made this transition seem easy. Is there anything that you learned from this or you think is important for people to share with people on this?
It was really important to me to take what I thought was the strength of my class. I mean, anybody can go online and watch a cocktail video, right? Like you can go on YouTube right now and learn to make the 50 classic cocktails you need to know, right? That video exists. But what the strength of my in-person classes had always been was bringing people together. Lots of friendships have been forged at the tables. Bringing people together, being really interactive, being hands-on, getting people doing and not just observing. And so I really thought a lot about how I could take the feeling of a Tammy's Tastings cocktail class and translate that into an online experience. And so we have small class sizes on Zoom, so everybody can see each other and talk to each other, and we stop and people mix and they show off their drinks. And the comments that I've gotten from people have been great, that they really do feel like they're in the room. So that to me was the important thing in making the transition. And then also just how do I use the new platform rather than just doing what I always do on a new platform. How do I take advantage of it? My PowerPoint game is strong, let me tell you.
Rad. Fear. Yes. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Tammy. And thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for creating that Hugo thing. I got to share with you, we're going to have quite a few panels for Hugo category finalists coming on the show. And I can't wait to learn.
I'm sure I can come up with some great cocktails to go along. Cheers, everybody.
Bye. Thank you very much. And on that note, I'm very happy to introduce Stephen Llano. I'm sorry, I'm not American and I don't have as much interaction with those kinds of names. I apologize to you, Steve Llano.
It's totally fine.
Now, you've been my friend for a while, to forgive me, but I still want to apologize about that. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the invite. Happy to be here.
Yeah, you're one of the people I truly appreciate to just stop by and talk to. Specifically in New York City, I have, in the New York area, I have quite a few friends I just like to talk to. For example, Karen and you. And if I can get both of you in one one stop. It's amazing for me. I get a lot of ideas and inspiration.
It's a particularly bad time for that, but maybe in the future.
One day, something to look forward to.
And maybe we'll all even meet together. I actually started planning that before everything happened, us and a few others, but still. So before we start, I want to share why I approached you about this. To start this sort of show corner on rhetoric and ideas and information. And it was because I sat with you for a beer with some friends, I think from Deloitte, and you shared your experience as a professor trying to do the same transition that Tammy has done to online and discovering some things. And one of the things you shared with me was, hey, how about the opposite? You know, what happens if you write a short story or some narrative around everybody working only online, everybody studying only online, and one day the internet goes down, they have to go to class, and they say, what's with all this space?
Yeah, right.
So
yeah, that was an idea that I kicked around about for a while, about the idea of what classrooms would be used for in the future. And I always had this image of these technicians coming in to put up a VM or to clean a server out. And they're like, what did they used to do at these places before there were servers? And I'd be like, well, you just shut up and do the job. Stop speculating. It's always been this way. And it just kind of grew from that. But yeah, I think it's a good way of thinking about what's necessary and what's accidental to the teaching experience.
So what is important to the teaching experience around this? What do you think has been your kind of biggest takeaway?
Well, I don't know how many people are going to listen to or watch this, but I'll be totally honest. For me, it's been a total disaster shifting from the classroom online. It's the worst semester I've ever taught, the lowest quality for sure. The only class that's doing well is my class that was an online class to begin with. That one seems to be fine. But I think the biggest thing we have to think about is that space, connecting that physical space of desks and the whiteboard and the lectern with what's going on in terms of teaching has way too much influence over what we teach and what we think teaching is. And it's going to take a long time, and we have to start peeling back those layers of physical discipline, what attention looks like, what time for instruction looks like. All these things have to be reinvestigated, and pretty quickly, because I think a lot of universities are probably not going to be in person in the fall. It's starting to look like.
Yeah, it's not easy right now in the academic space, in any space really. So that's something we definitely need to think about. So on that note, you have prepared something for us today.
I did.
Well, I'm happy to just pass it over to you. But
okay.
But before I do that, I do want to give you some credit. I know it will embarrass you.
Oh, no, it's okay.
You have done a lot. So you're an associate professor of rhetoric at St. John's. We kind of went over that. But you also published in argumentation and advocacy, and in contemporary argumentation and debate. Debate is part of your life. You care a lot about this. You care about students learning stuff with it. And stuff is, by the way, a professional term. And you have blogs. I think you have 2 podcasts, Republic of Sophistan and In the Bin. And I think you also have all of this on your website, right? Sophist.nyc.
That's correct. Sophist.nyc is the kind of the place to find everything I'm doing. I have links there to everything in case people are curious.
Good. Well, I will say that I appreciate you, and I appreciate you coming on the show yet again.
Oh, it's very nice of you. I appreciate you too, Gadi.
There you go. And you will teach me how to say names.
Maybe it's not a foreign thing to get Llano like that. Americans do it all the time. They say, I've heard everything. Well, we can talk about that later.
I've seen MC at the event saying, oh, I hope I pronounced that right. So I try to reciprocate all I'm saying.
It's perfect. Anyway, good rhetorical form.
Back to you, and take it away. Thank you.
All right. There was a time when people felt pretty comfortable that they knew things, or at least they knew that the people who were supposed to know things actually knew them. But then something changed. Too much reliable information was available. The people who we thought knew things expressed unfamiliarity with new books, new publications, and ideas we had heard from other supposedly knowledgeable people. A crisis began to emerge. From the coffee shops to the university, the question ceaselessly appeared, how do you know? It didn't seem possible to really know anything for sure, since there was always something new. Now, this might sound like our contemporary world, but what I'm describing is early modern Europe, the 18th century. Technological advancements meant that books could be produced cheaper and easier, and they were more frequent, and they could be easier to obtain. They had a lower price. Prior to these innovations, the way you knew what knowledge was simply that you had to read all of the books on the subject. So for example, there would be somewhere between 7 to 12 books on botany or surgery or poetry, and off you go to find them. The early version of Google was a wagon, a horse, or a ship. Let's go after our search terms. Let's find the information. After you're done, welcome to your new life as a lecturer. After all, you've not just read more than the students you'll teach, you've read more than anyone. The increase in books meant a lack of ability to read them all, seriously undercutting our understanding of knowledge. If books are coming out too frequently to be accessed and read, how can you be sure you know everything? Well, the panic of a world of unknown books upset the grounding for the valuation of information so much that new standards of what it meant to know had to be created. The solution was the German creation of the PhD and the rise of the modern research university. Now expertise was determined not by consuming all the books, but adding to the morass of books. If you can write a book that not only fits into the books out there on the subject, but expands the possibility of more books being created on the subject, you are indeed knowledgeable. You can speak for the field as opposed to as the field in the previous arrangement of knowledge. Chad Wellman's book, Organizing Enlightenment, argues that such moments in history, where the certainty of what good information is or can be, are generative of larger discussions about the anxieties of authority, rightness, and accuracy. They are not solved, and this is not how knowledge improves. He writes, specialized science or disciplinarity, emerged in an age of media surplus, not as a problem to be solved, but as a solution. The contemporary idea of an expert was not meant to investigate this issue further, but to ease anxiety by producing a new relationship to and with knowledge. Our solution is not veracity, but capacity. We can accept this arrangement as knowledge, good information, because it calms us down. Even in a well-structured world where we have science and the research university there to give us a sense of a known knowledge to lean on, we are still haunted by knowledge of our own incapacities in relation to knowledge. James Gleick, in his book, The Information, A History, A Theory of Flood, writes about our contemporary feeling as loss, where, quoting him, the anxiety is in terms of the gap between information and knowledge. A barrage of data so often fails to tell us what we need to know. Knowledge, in turn, does not guarantee enlightenment or wisdom. This gap that he's talking about is uncertainty, something that the great educational engines of the world are dedicated to eliminating. But it is never gone, no matter how much paper or how large the word counts go. This uncertainty is not accepted or celebrated because we do not or cannot accept that a valuable part of human life might be constituted through doubt. We can never really be sure, not even of that. The inability of people to accept or determine good information is sometimes called confirmation bias. It's a very popular term. I'm sure you've all heard it. The specter of confirmation bias haunts nearly every discussion about information these days, and it's one that, ironically, we think we understand. Nassim Nicholas Taleb, in his book Black Swan, gives one of the better accounts of the troubles of confirmation bias, that human beings are naturally geared towards looking for the information that matches with what they already believe they know about the world. Quoting Taleb, a logical mistake in reality, but not in the classroom. And that's his definition of it. That's a pretty good way of thinking about it. The way we teach the interpretation of information and the applicability of information for judgments works great when that's the only thing that we're assessing. But when there are no classroom rules, thinking in this way becomes difficult. Taleb is quite right that we often confuse absence of evidence for evidence of absence. And in a classroom, these things can be controlled as conditions of the test. But information is not pure. It's always known or missed through context. The classroom context is clean compared to the daily context. On top of this, confirmation bias might not be the biggest problem. Hugo Mercier in Dan Sperber's book, The Enigma of Reason, argues that confirmation bias is developed as a way of assisting human reason. Human reason, they theorize, exists to better human communication. Reason is, quoting them, biased because it overwhelmingly finds justifications and arguments that support the reasoner's point of view, lazy because reason makes little effort to assess the quality of the justifications and arguments it produces. Confirmation is termed by them the my side bias, where reason is seen in terms of the speed and necessity of communication, where the best, most accessible reasons for doing something are located and presented. They also point out that most human communication happens in conversation, where the exchanges are quick and there's significant back and forth. As reasons that persuaded us initially fail because someone has pointed out that they're bad, we reach for the next most likely quick support, and further on in the conversation we go. Research also indicates that we're much better at questioning reasons that are not our own, perhaps something that developed alongside the my side bias to ensure that biased, lazy reasoning was not weak. As we exchange conversation, we eliminate insufficient reasons in favor of not true or real information, but contextually best information. Information forms out of reasons in conversational contexts because it is designed for conversation, communication, the things that humans have relied on more than anything to ensure success of the species. So what can we do with all this information I just presented you? What is suggested many times by Mercy and Sperber and their work is an activity from my own field, that of rhetoric. Have an old-fashioned debate where parties come up with the best case for their side possible and engage with one another using reasons, those things designed to sway, from the my side bias and the epistemic vigilance we have as a feature of thought, because we favor our own beliefs. Although information will never be good, it will also never be terrible unless we take it directly into the context of our thinking and make it our own in a very direct way and engage others with it. I always say to my students that truth is not the objective of research or inquiry, but the starting point of research and inquiry. This is because when we discover something we think is true or right or good, we are immediately compelled to go engage others with it. We want to tell the world, and luckily the world wants to question us and tell us to back down. This exchange is the root of finding good information and knowledge, the art of discourse, dialogue, or simply conversation, the root model of everything from basic human instruction to rigorous political argument. As we share our idea, we encounter things we haven't considered or can't consider if Mercy and Sperber are right. What we need to make sure is that we have the best grasp on the information is other people. That's the best way we can test our ideas. Practically, we need opportunities to practice. Our world does not give us that. We are meant to sit alone, read something on a screen, and determine if it's good information. Yet research indicates that a debate where both sides don't try to agree with each other, but try to disagree and bring out all the best reasons they can find for their side is an efficient way to locate the best information based upon the features, not bugs, of human reasoning. Instead of wishing for better equipment, let's use the equipment we have and be honest about how it works. This is not only a good line for a university professor who's often underfunded and undersupported, but great for all of us to recognize that information can't be good or bad without the context of human communication. The context that it creates, exposes, provides, and questions. Information is only good after it has been shared with others.
Thank you for that, Steve.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. I have a question for you, if you don't mind. You're talking about biases.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find, have you developed a sort of mechanism for yourself to try and detect these biases?
Well, I think that the problem with bias detection is that our world encourages us to find out that we're right and then go try to convert others instead of going out and engaging with others before we're absolutely certain about our ideas. And I think that we're kind of encouraged to determine that in isolation. And I think the research on bias and all these things seems to indicate that we, if you buy into evolutionary psychology and the research they're doing, that we have evolved to determine good information through interaction with others, through the shortness of a verbal exchange, of a conversation where we're trying to make a decision. And that's where confirmation bias comes from, is I have to be very quick and get something out I think is persuasive to you, and then you have to be very vigilant to push it back. So for me, I'm always talking and asking questions with other people. And I think that conversational context is the most important for trying to find bias in information. Mm-hmm. Sitting alone, we don't really have the equipment to sit alone and evaluate something as unbiased. We have to talk about it with other people. And, you know, I don't know about social media for that. On one hand, it seems really good for that. On the other hand, it seems really inadequate. It just depends on, I guess, how you use it, like a lot of things.
You know, I've been thinking about bias a lot and putting this back into the framing of fake news. Yes, this is important and we need to try and figure out what we do about all of this, but I kind of accepted that if information comes to me online, it's entertainment. If I actually care for something, I go and research it and try to figure out what the heck is going on, you know? But
do you also do this online?
Well, I'm a kind of a spammer on Facebook. I'm very active. And I share things, and because something makes me laugh, because I like the rhetoric, because I like the title, because I like how well they presented their ideas, or anything of the sort. It doesn't necessarily present my own opinions, but what I find is That's how I use Facebook. That's how I use the internet. And some other people don't like it, but I haven't seen another solution than I've seen concerns of people becoming dull to the truth. And I think I'm in, a lot of people would not agree with me. I'm in the minority, but I find that becoming dull to the truth is actually, it can be a useful thing. It can be something that guides me to accept things as entertainment and just take at face value that they're not true. And if I actually want to learn something, then I put in the effort. I don't think it's sustainable for anybody to go and Google and search and research things. Biases are real. And if you look to psychology, not a psychologist, a lot of disclaimers there. All these aspects, for example, in social psychology around social proof, reciprocation, all these keys of influence, as Robert Cialdini calls them, are useful to us. We can't make all the thousands of decisions we need to make all the time. It helps us act faster. It helps us interact in our world. And I don't want to lose that. So I'm just as a comment, I'm not sure if there is something for us to tell other people to do rather than just accept the situation, which is a little bit sad.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there with, I mean, bias is obviously not a bad thing. It's very useful to have different biases. That's kind of how we construct how we move through the world. But biases become dangerous when you start to think of truth as something other than a process. If you look to all of the places where truth is determined to be vital, medicine, scientific research, or legal procedure, truth is an intricate process that takes years and years and years to study how to participate and get involved in that process. So when you think of truth as an object to be attained, that's dangerous.
Yeah, but the thing is, you're an expert in your field, right? And it's an unbearable complexity, even for experts in their field, to find out. Truth is too abstract for me right now. Mm-hmm. But if I want to study something that's in contention, for example, whatever reason, whether it should be or shouldn't be, not touching on the political aspect, global warming, okay? Mm-hmm. For me, there will be an unbearable complexity to try and learn anything about it. If I take something that's not in contention, let's assume body language, unbearable complexity to go through all the information and try to figure something out. So I don't really like the idea of Googling for things, but I do appreciate that we do continue to get better. Mm-hmm. Our basic assumptions could be, here is a basic, I collect basic assumptions that people just integrate. Malka was talking about some of these earlier, and it doesn't have to be something around gender or race. For example, there is this truth that managers should make their chair much, much larger than those people sitting in front of them. I don't know if it's true or not. I personally dislike that. But I found a source I think is the actual source from a book in 1910 that just wrote about it as a best practice. And everybody's been talking about it as if it's truth. There is the numbers around, I don't remember the precise numbers right now, but something like 50-something% body language, 30-something% tone of voice, and 7% only with actual words. I would like to see them teach your class with those kinds of numbers, where what happened was there were several researchers in the 50s and 60s. One of them was, if I pronounce his name right, Moravian. And in a lab environment, when he came out and said something along the lines of, "Hello, how are you?" or "Hello, how are you?" there is a major difference that the body language, the taste of the words come in. But when you teach math, not so much. Another one, and I'll stop there, is about 10% gays, right? That doesn't include the definition of what's gay. It assumes only one type of person, a little othering there. It doesn't assume bisexuality, but we kind of covered that. It doesn't assume a lot of things. And the pool the research came out from was, I think, I forget his name is running away from me right now, but he did the major research on sexuality in the 40s, if you remember the person. So it helped open the world to that kind of research, but everybody quotes constantly 10% gays, which is not true. So how information infiltrates us, even without biases, we don't have to have a bias to come to the wrong conclusion.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And I think the idea of, I just like thinking of truth as a living thing, as a malleable thing. And it's something that's a wonderful thing that helps us make judgments. But the other beautiful thing about being human is that we can retract those judgments and make different ones. So I think that quest for the absolute solidity of truth is a dangerous one, that I call it the enlightenment hangover, that things can be known and then we put them on the shelf. Think about it more like a houseplant or an aquarium than a nice statue. And I think you'll have a better relationship to truth.
You know, when I was a bit younger, I used to be more controversial. I would share my opinions. I'm kidding, kind of, maybe. But what I learned is, even people who did not like me online, when they actually met me, gave me a chance, which I truly appreciated. And there is a quote that I'm not sure about myself, but I found invigorated some thoughts for me. And that was, the problem with prejudices, and I can't attribute it, and I might be misquoting it. The problem with prejudices is not that they exist, but that they are not the whole truth.
Mm.
It kind of rings for me as you're talking.
Yeah. It's sort of like that paring of it down to something very pragmatic and something I can politically use. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, yeah.
False, right? Don't get me wrong. And just I found it energized me to think of the actual issues.
Mm-hmm.
I like that because it makes the point that prejudice is knowledge. It's just you know, and if you don't dig deeper, it's unclear to you how shallow that knowledge is. It's really more about accepting a very incomplete or poorly researched you know, piece of knowledge and not identifying it as, you know, of as little substance as it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I think if for people who are interested in going deeper on this, that Chad Wellman book I quoted is a fantastic case study of what happens when there are too many books for you to read them all in one lifetime. How can you say you know when that's the standard? And so the solution was to reduce anxiety about, do we really know anything, rather than to actually present, yes, we can know anything. I think that's a great way to think about our current condition too.
We have become also, as a society, and for good reason, I think we need to swing hard in the other direction. We've become careful, if not even weary of biases and buckets and putting people into buckets. That said, the way we psychologically work, not trying to excuse any bad behavior, you know, these help us. We need them to function day to day. And I love some of my biases. They help me make quick judgments. They help me, you know, make sure that I function in a way. And finding the line between those, or trying to gather information around the way I behave, is kind of the critical aspect of that for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like this question. I think these are questions from people watching about how do you keep up when things are buried under advertisement stuff. That might be a whole other thing I could talk about at some point. But you know, it's just it's tough because, you know, this has gone, the internet's gone the way of books and the newspapers, and they've been commercially taken over. And in the early 90s, that's not what people thought was going to happen to the internet. So you have a lot of money playing in there as well. And that's a whole other thing I could talk about another time, is strategies for that. But that's a huge question. I think it's a very important question. Is,
I think we would appreciate you doing that, yeah. We can't really touch too much. We need to wrap this up.
Right.
But I do want to acknowledge the question. I'll read it out and we can talk about it for a minute, but then we'll move over to Karen's reading. But I do want to mention, next week we have a show with Cory Doctorow and some people, for example, other people as well. Steve Crocker, who is one of the founders of the internet, ARPANET, and quite a few security founders. A few of them even sold their companies for over $2 billion. And the reason I mention this is because they're going to touch on the culture of aspects, of the cultural aspect of things. How do you make these digital policies? How do they survive or act when they run into aspects such as these or challenges such as this? And the week after, more important than that, for this particular question, we have a show on so-called fake news, disinformation, misinformation, influence operations, information operations, whatever you want to call it. We're bringing in actual experts in the field, professionals in the field, to talk about it. So it's not the subject is not reduced as usual to admiring the problem and mentioning social networks or specific countries or specific political entities. So that might be a good show for the person to attend. The question is, and I'm not going to quote the name right now because we didn't ask for permission yet. Just write down in the chat if you're willing for us to do that. So the question is, Google's algorithm changes and suddenly users of its search engine are at least momentarily on a tilting floor in a funhouse. Essence of wonder and this event are buried in the middle of ads for skin cream. I wonder what type. How does an ordinary person keep up without an information to look out for weaponized narrative? So I think that's a big question. I just wanted to acknowledge it being asked, and we can get into that maybe on the weaponized narrative front in 2 weeks. With that said, I appreciate you coming on the show, Steve.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Absolutely. We would like to have you back.
Well, one day I will come back.
Sounds good to me.
Wonderful. Yeah, we had some follow-up questions for you.
Absolutely. On that note, I'm happy to pass it on to Karen. Karen, you once again have a wonderful reading for us. What are you going to read for us?
Yes, so we talked a lot today about how to hear the marginalized narrative and how to make sure that we're hearing the voices and acknowledging the realities of those who are not like us. Among those, I'll introduce my guest reader. This is my stuffed Cthulhu or Cthulhu, and this piece is by Neil Gaiman, who was generous enough to let us access his work or share his work here during the coronavirus pandemic. And this piece is called I Cthulhu. It is Cthulhu's sort of dictated last thoughts.
Well, I will just say before you read to us that I have this baby Yoda Cthulhu right here with me. I'm just saying. And I have this little guy here as well, almost by accident. And I wanted to show off before you start reading.
Well, maybe not as underrepresented as we think.
There you go.
Our work is working. And so I give you I Cthulhu. Cthulhu, they call me. Great Cthulhu. Nobody can pronounce it right. Are you writing this down? Every word? Good. Where shall I start? Very well, then, the beginning. Write this down, Waitley. I was spawned uncounted eons ago in the dark mists of Ka-Yinaya. No, of course I don't know how to spell it, write it as it sounds, of nameless nightmare parents under a gibbous moon. It wasn't the moon of this planet, of course, it was a real moon. On some nights, it filled over half the sky, and as it rose, you could watch the crimson blood drip and trickle down its bloated face, staining it red until at its height it bathed the swamps and towers in a gory, dead red light. Those were the days, or rather the nights on the whole. Our place had a fun of sorts, but it was old even back then. I remember that on the night it finally exploded, we all slithered down to the beach to watch. But I get ahead of myself. I never knew my parents. My father was consumed by my mother as soon as he had fertilized her, and she, in her turn, was eaten by myself at my birth. That is my first memory as it happens, squirming my way out of my mother, the gamey taste of her still in my tentacles. Don't look so shocked, Waitley. I find you humans just as revolting. Which reminds me, did you remember to feed the Shoggoth? I thought I heard it gibbering. I spent my first few thousand years in those swamps. I did not like this, of course, for I was the color of a young trout and about 4 of your feet long. I spent most of my time creeping up on things and eating them, and in my turn avoiding being crept upon and eaten. So passed my youth. Then one day, I believe it was a Tuesday, I discovered that there was more to life than food. Sex? Of course not. I will not reach that stage until after my next estivation. Your piddly little planet will be long cold by then. It was that Tuesday that my Uncle Hastur slithered down to my part of the swamp with his jaws fused. It meant that he did not intend to dine that visit, and that we could talk. Now that is a stupid question even for you, Waitley. I don't use either of my mouths in communicating with you, do I? Very well then. One more question like that and I'll find someone else to relate my memoirs to, and you will be feeding the Shoggoth. We were going out, said Hastur to me. Would you like to accompany us? We, I asked him, who's we? Myself, he said, Azathoth, Yog-Sothoth, Nyarlathotep, Sathogha, Lag, Shub-Niggurath, Young Yuggoth, and a few others. You know, he said, the boys. I am freely translating for you here, wait till you understand. Most of them were a bi, or trisexual, and old Lag, Shub-Niggurath was at least 1,000 young or so, it says. That branch of the family was always given to exaggeration. We're going out, he concluded, and we were wondering if you fancied some fun. I did not answer him at once. To tell the truth, I wasn't all that fond of my cousins, and due to some particularly eldritch distortion of the planes, I'd always had a great deal of trouble seeing them clearly. They tend to get fuzzy around the edges, and some of them, Sabaoth is a case in point, have a great many edges. But I was young, I craved excitement. There has to be more to life than this, I would cry, as the delightfully fetid carnal smells of the swamp miasmatized around me. And I overheard the now and Zitidars whooped and squarked. I said yes, as you have probably guessed, and I oozed after Hastur until we reached the meeting place. As I remember, we spent the next moon discussing where we were going. Azathoth had his hearts set on distant Shagai, and Nyarlathotep had a thing about the unspeakable place. I can't for the life of me think why. The last time I was there, everything was shut. It was all the same to me, Whately. Anywhere wet and somehow subtly wrong, and I feel right at home. But Yog-Sothoth had the last word, as he always does, and we came to this plain. You've met Yog-Sothoth, have you not, my little two-legged beastie? I thought as much. He opened the way for us to come here. To be honest, I didn't think much of it. Still don't. If I'd known the trouble we were going to have, I doubt I'd have bothered, but I was younger then. As I remember, our first stop was Dim Carcosa. Scared the shit out of me, that place. These days I can look at your kind without a shudder, but all those people without a scale or pseudopod between them gave me the quivers. The King in Yellow was the first I ever got on with. The Tatterdemalion Queen. You don't know of him? Necronomicon, page 704 of the complete edition, hints at his existence, and I think that idiot Prynne mentions him in De Vermis Mysterious. And then there's Chambers, of course. Lovely fellow, once I got used to him. He was the one who first gave me the idea. What the unspeakable hells is there to do in this dreary dimension, I asked him. He laughed. When I first came here, he said, a mere color out in space, I asked myself the same question. Then I discovered the fun one can get in conquering these odd worlds, subjugating the inhabitants, getting them to fear and worship you. It's a real laugh. Of course, the old ones don't like it. The old ones, I asked. No, he said, the old ones, it's capitalized. Funny chaps, like great starfish-headed barrels with filmy great wings that they fly through space with. Fly through space? Fly? I was shocked. I didn't think anybody flew these days. Why bother when one can sluggle anyway? I could see why they called them the old ones. Pardon, old ones. What do these old ones do? I asked the king. I'll tell you all about sluggling later, Whately. Pointless, though. You lack wishnai. Although perhaps badminton equipment would do almost as well. Where was I? Oh, yes. What do these old ones do? I asked the king. Nothing much, he explained. They just don't like anybody else doing it. I undulated, writhing my tentacles as if to say, I have met such beings in my time, but fear the message was lost on the king. Do you know of any places ripe for conquering? I asked him. He waved a hand vaguely in the direction of a small and dreary patch of stars. There's one over there that you might like, he told me. It's called Earth. Bit off the beaten track, but lots of room to move. Silly bugger. That's all for now, Whately. Tell someone to feed the Shoggoth on your way out. Second section. Is it time already, Whately? Don't be silly. I know that I sent for you. My memory is as good as it ever was. You know what that means, don't you? In his house at Ryla, dead Cthulhu rates dreaming. A justified exaggeration that I haven't been feeling too well recently. It was a joke. One had a joke. Are you writing all this down? Good. Keep writing. I know where we got up to yesterday. Relelia, Earth. That's an example of the way that languages change, the meanings of words, fuzziness. I can't stand it. Once upon a time, Relelia was the Earth, or at least the part of it that I ran, the wet bits at the start. Now it's just my little house here, latitude 47 degrees south, longitude 126 degrees west. Or the old ones. They call us the old ones now, or the great old ones, as if there were no difference between us and the Barrel Boys. Fuzziness. So I came to Earth, and in those days it was a lot wetter than it is today. A wonderful place it was, the seas as rich as soup, and I got on wonderfully with the people. Dagon and the boys, I use the word literally this time, we all lived in the water in those far-off times, and before you could say Cthulhu Flain, I had them building and slaving and cooking, and being cooked, of course. Which reminds me, there was something I meant to tell you. True story. There was a ship sailing on the seas, on a Pacific cruise, and on this ship was a magician, a conjurer, whose function was to entertain the passengers. And there was this parrot on the ship. Every time the magician did a trick, the parrot would ruin it. How? He'd tell them how it was done, that's how. He put it up his sleeve, the parrot would squawk, or he stacked the deck, or it's got a false bottom. The magician didn't like it. Finally, the time came for him to do his biggest trick. He announced it. He rolled up his sleeves, he waved his arms. At that moment, the ship bucked and smashed over to one side. Sunken Relia had risen beneath him. Hordes of my servants, loathsome fishmen, swarmed over the side, seized the passengers and crew, and dragged them beneath the waves. Relia sank beneath the waters once more. awaiting that time when dread Cthulhu shall rise and reign once more. Alone above the foul waters, the magician, overlooked by my little Batrachian boobies, for which they paid heavily, floated, clinging to a spar, all alone. And then, far above him, he noticed a small green shape. It came lower, finally perching on a clump of nearby driftwood, and he saw it was the parrot. The parrot cocked its head to one side and squinted up at the magician. "All right," it says. "I give up. How did you do it?" "Of course it's a true story, Waitley. Would black Cthulhu, who slimed out of the dark stars when your most eldritch nightmares were suckling at their mother's pseudo-mammaria, who waits for the time that the stars come right to come forth from his tomb palace, revive the faithful and resume his rule, who waits to teach anew the high and luscious pleasures of death and revelry, would he lie to you?" "Sure I would. Shut up, Waitley, I'm talking. I don't care where you heard it before." We had fun in those days. Carnage and destruction, sacrifice and damnation, ichor and slime and ooze, and foul and nameless games. Food and fun, it was one long party, and everybody loved it, except for those who found themselves impaled on wooden stakes between a chunk of cheese and pineapple. Oh, there were giants on Earth in those days. It couldn't last forever. Down from the skies they came with filmy wings and rules and regulations and routines and Dochna knows how many forms to be filled out in quintuplicate. Banal little bureaucrats, the lot of them. You could see it just looking at them. 5 pointed heads. Everyone you looked at had 5 points. Arms, whatever, on their heads, which I might add were always in the same place. None of them had the imagination to grow 3 arms or 6 or 102. 5 every time. No offense meant. We didn't get on. They didn't like my party. They rapped on the walls, metaphorically. We paid no attention. Then they got mean, argued, bitched, fought. "Okay," we said, "you want the sea, you can have the sea. Lock, stock, and starfish-headed barrel." We moved on to the land. It was pretty swampy back then, and we bit a gargantuan monolithic structures that dwarfed the mountains. You know what killed off the dinosaurs, Waitley? We did, in one barbecue. But those pointy-headed killjoys couldn't leave well enough alone. They tried to move the planet nearer the sun, or was it further away? I never actually asked them. Next thing I knew, we were under the sea again. You had to laugh. The city of the old ones got it in the neck. They hated the dry and the cold, as did their creatures. All of a sudden, they were in the Antarctic, dry as a bone and cold as the lost plains of thrice-accursed Lang. Here endeth the lesson for today, Waitley. And will you please get somebody to feed that blasted Shoggoth? Part 3. Professors Armitage and Wilmarth are both convinced that not less than 3 pages are missing from the manuscript at this point, citing the text in length. I concur. The stars changed, Waitley. Imagine your body cut away from your head, leaving you a lump of flesh on a chill marble slab, blinking and choking. That was what it was like. The party was over. It killed us. So we wait here below. Dreadful, huh? Not at all. I don't give a nameless dread. I can wait. I sit here dead and dreaming, watching the ant empires of man rise and fall, tower and crumble. One day, perhaps it will come tomorrow, perhaps in more tomorrows than your feeble mind can encompass, the stars will be rightly conjoined in the heavens, and the time of destruction shall be upon us. I shall rise from the deep, and I shall have dominion over the world once more. Riot and revel, blood food and foulness, eternal twilight and nightmare, and the screams of the dead and the not dead, and the chant of the faithful. And after, I shall leave this plane when this world is a cold cinder orbiting a lightless sun. I shall return to my own place, where the blood drips nightly down the face of a moon that bulges like the eye of a drowned sailor, and I shall estivate. Then I shall mate, and in the end I shall feel a stirring within me, and I shall feel my little one eating its way out into the light. Are you writing this all down, Waitley? Good. Well, that's all. The end. Narrative concluded. Guess what we're going to go do now? That's right. We're going to feed the Shoggoth.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate that. Who would have thought? I didn't know that Gaiman did Cthulhu. That's fun.
In the name of understanding multiple perspectives and not going with, leaning carelessly on our tropes. I think we've heard from a range of perspectives today.
I think That was not necessarily intentional, but I really like that's where the show ended up. So definitely. And on that note, I would like to thank Malka, thank Steve and Tammy, the production crew that makes all this happen. And next week, we're going to have Cory Doctorow, and he's going to be civil with security experts. Thank you all for attending. We appreciate it. The videos will be out very soon, and have a great day or night, wherever you are. This was Essence of Wonder.